President Obama visiting New Jersey today and announcing some big changes when it comes to the way the police departments will operate. He's trying to prevent another Ferguson or Baltimore. Then Governor Cuomo's latest controversial education plan. Some parents, they love it, others hating it. We'll tell you all about it, and we'll debate it here at the table. Also, all the corruption in Albany, no laughing matter, but I'm still try to have a little fun with it tonight. I'm going to channel my inner Alex Trebek and quiz the panel to see how much they know about who the biggest crooks are. A lot to choose from. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks for joining us tonight. Now, President Obama, he was in New Jersey today, and he spoke in Camden a few hours ago, in fact, making an announcement and it concerned policing in America.
You know, we've seen how militarized gear can sometimes give people a feeling like there's an occupying force as opposed to a force that's part of the community that's protecting them and serving them. So we're going to prohibit some equipment made for the battlefield that is not appropriate for local police departments.
You may remember some of those images. The situation got national attention that after the Ferguson Police Department rolled out military-grade equipment to deal with protests that after the Michael Brown death. President Obama, he's trying to tamp down tensions between police departments and communities primarily of color. The police says getting rid of the military equipment will help. And he also used Camden as an example of how community policing can actually help improve relations. The county, it took over that city's police force and focused on getting cops more involved in the communities. So let's bring in our table right now and get into some of the challenges we talked quite a bit about on this program for the last few months about those simmering tensions in some of these communities. Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College, as well as a professor of campaign management at NYU, is kind enough to join us, along with the regulars, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. Okay, Andrew, I think a lot of people were surprised just how militarized some police departments were, and it wasn't just the biggest inner city ones. I mean, you look around, you got in Long Island and some communities in New Jersey, you pretty much got tanks, you know, and assault gear and stuff, like they're taking Normandy Beach here. That's right in some of these police departments. I know it took some of us off guard. We take a look at, for example, take a look at Nassau County. You got assault rifles, you know, look at Suffolk, 4 times as much, and the armored vehicles as well. I know there's some rougher areas, but at the same end, you know, what kind of message does that send to the community?
Well, I think it sends a difficult message to the community, and we saw that in action in Ferguson, in Baltimore, and in other places where there has been a very heavy police response, particularly to public protests. It's a political problem to a certain degree because the military has this excess gear and needs something to do with it, and politicians want to be able to say that they're supporting law enforcement by issuing some of those materials to be moved then to these local police departments. So all of the forces, the political forces are in play to keep this process going. It really hasn't occurred to anybody that it was sort of detrimental to some of these communities until we saw Ferguson and until we saw Baltimore and other situations like it.
It does come at a curious time, though, Dominic. We've obviously seen tragedy in terms of officers lost in the line of duty right now. We've also seen, I remember in Jersey City not long ago, where officers were outgunned by, you know, some real thugs here on the streets that had assault weapons. All in all, even with a balancing act, I think this was the right message today?
Definitely, and I'm glad you referred to the people in Jersey City as thugs, because I would call them much worse. After they erected, if you will, that shrine to the drug dealer that ambushed the police officer and not to the police officer. So with that said, what this president is doing, and it's a good thing, he's delivering for his base. And I think it's a reasonable move. We don't want our police officers who put their lives on the line each and every day to be outgunned. But do they really need a tank or a rocket launcher? Do we really want an occupying force? And frankly, the only communities that these elements are used on happen to be communities of color, unless somebody can tell me wrong, because I haven't seen a tank being pulled out with a demonstration with white kids.
It's not rolling down middle of Scarsdale here, that's for sure. But timing and optics are a lot of it. Today's address, I haven't heard a lot of backlash. Do you think there will be from people who say, oh, the president's anti-cop?
No, I don't think there's going to be a lot of backlash. In the last few days, the last 48 hours plus, he's done a lot to salute police officers, and I think that's helped to mitigate some of that backlash. But I do think it raises a larger question. While I agree with this step forward, I do think it raises a question as to where we as Americans see policing headed. What do we want our police officers to do? I was listening to members of the President's Task Force today, and they were talking about the fact that police today are being asked to be social workers, to be teachers, to be fighting terrorists. So, all of these various things. And, they can't do everything. And where do we want them to head and what do we want them to do is a conversation we have to have, because otherwise you leave these people on the street with a variety of tasks and in some cases without the ability to fulfill them. And I think that's a big question.
It's funny, to Jeannie's point. I go through a few papers every day, and in one of the local community I am, police have fought, and now they've gotten Narcan, which is basically what's used when there's a heroin overdose. It can revive a person, a drug addict, who's literally potentially ready to die. The same adjacent article, police were in a scuffle with a mentally disturbed person here, and they really didn't know where to bring the person anymore because there's an absence of beds. To amplify Jeannie's point, think about all of the simmering tensions that are in primarily minority communities that forever have been saying there's two levels of justice, one for this population, one for us. And the video, in certain situations, have given credence to that. But then on the same end, we're asking cops to do more and more, and then the messaging is, now you're trying to be an occupying force. Just her note on terrorism, right? I mean, and you can argue the NYPD is more advanced in anti-terror capacities than a whole lot of nations right now. It's a tall order.
There are a lot of subtopics, sub-issues that need to be gotten into when we're talking about policing in the United States. And obviously the focus on terrorism and terror prevention is critical. We have not done anything to advance helping people with mental health issues. And we see this with reporting out of Rikers, for example, that becomes a holding place basically for a lot of people who have mental health issues who should probably be in a medical system as opposed to being in the criminal justice system. Having said all that, you also wind up with, SWAT teams issuing warrants and delivering search warrants for low-level suspects because police departments have these capacities and all of this excess military gear.
That's cool, and you want to use it.
Well, but it's not just that. You have to use it, or you wind up risking losing it or not getting the next shipment going around. And everybody knows how budgeting processes work. You got to spend what you have, or you're not going to get the same or more next year when it's time for the budget.
But I just hope people saw that chart that we put up. If people think that it's just in certain communities, where, way down south or somewhere else, if you look at the bedroom communities around New York City and the suburban markets, look at some of those areas and think about where these armored vehicles are and where some of these assault weapons are. It's not necessarily the usual suspects.
But Richard, the issue also is, I'm not necessarily against the police departments having this force, if you will, but who's really trained at using it? In terms of, the professor mentioned the social work aspect, police officers have an impossible job. I was in Harlem today. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. There was somebody behind me mumbling, was mentally ill. Then you add in the mental illness component, and groups like NAMI and so on nationwide, in many areas, and I know I'm going off, but they will come up with grants to train a local police officer that rides around a special vehicle just to respond to mentally ill calls. Imagine how many calls like that, Richard, come into the city of New York on each and every day, or any major city in our area.
Anyway, interesting statement from the president today, and I think Jeannie's right. I don't think there'll be a lot of pushback, but nonetheless, this whole debate about policing, what has to happen within the 21st century, especially with now the onset of video cameras, let alone body cameras, etc. A lot of moving parts. All right, when we come back, though, a debate much closer to home here, and it has to do with school choice. Governor Cuomo, he wants tax credits for parents sending their kids to private schools. Now, if you're a parent who's shelling out a lot in tuition, you love the idea, but the critics are saying, time out here. This isn't fair. Who's right? Who's wrong? We'll debate that at the table after this.